Welcome back, guys. This is series 2, so we're going to look at primary research selection here and what you should do for that. So with this assessment task, you have to choose at least 2 primary research methods. The compulsory being questionnaire and an interview. So briefly, you're going to look at a questionnaire here. We have done this in class before, but if we look at a sort of template questionnaire here to get things started off, to refresh you on how to do that, have a look here. So I will share this template with you, but what you can see here is a base template which starts your questionnaire off, and you can use this to help assist you. So what you want to start off with is putting the name of your topic. Now again, if you're not 100% on it, don't stress. If you write something like whatever topic it is you're looking at, so for example, if it's casual racism towards Middle Eastern people, like that example we looked at last video, you might just write that as your title. Casual racism towards Middle Eastern ethnicity. Boom, it might be straight up there. You'll then, as according to our ethical research guidelines, have to put some kind of disclaimer here, informing participants what your research is about, how you're going to be using it, and sort of getting their consent and ensuring their anonymity in the disclaimer. Okay, so that's part of our ethical research guidelines that we have to do. So you can use this as a template. You feel free to write your own, but this is one that's kind of already done for you, and I think it reads quite well. The only thing you've got to put in is your topic here. Okay, so I'm conducting a social research paper examining casual racism towards Middle Eastern people in Australia. You might then change this and talk about, I will examine how it's changed over time as part of a contemporary research issue, full stop. Most of this stuff you would probably keep the same. So this is just saying what the data is going to be used for. A disclaimer on, I guess, participant comfort. Again, our ethical research guidelines and social and cultural literacy states that we shouldn't make anyone feel uncomfortable, so we don't make any question compulsory if they don't want to fill it out. So they can skip a question, and we're just letting them know that they can do that. And then here we're telling them that all responses will be anonymous as part of that ethical research guide as well. And then a little, thanks goes a long way. So when we look at our questionnaire though, there are always 4 sort of key questions that we must have, okay, at least. The first one is, what is your age range, okay? And we do this as a drop down, and what it will look like when it's done as a preview is something like this. So it looks nice and neat, and they can pick it. The reason that we do, I should get rid of that. The reason that I particularly like these age ranges is because a 15 to 18 year old, if we just did 10 years for everything, we just went 15 to 25, a 15-year-old's opinion, so that's a year 9 student / year 10 student, is very different to a 25-year-old who might have a university degree and is in their first professional job, right? So that 10-year gap isn't really applicable there. We know that people mature very quickly in the first stage of their life cycles, and then as they get older, they typically tend to stay the same as they get older. So that's why at the younger age ranges, you'll notice there's a lot less years involved, and then as we get older, they gradually increase. The reason we have our age range here is because when you guys in your assessment are examining this thing, change over time, and you're assessing the extent of the change in regard to your chosen topic, it is really important to know your participants' age ranges, because you might find upon breaking down the responses and an analysis of your data, this is empty because no one's done it, you might find that 100% of people aged 15 to 24 said yes towards believing in or advocating for something. Let's say the death penalty is our hypothetical contemporary issue we're looking at. You might find that your responses are 50-50 split between people saying yes, I agree with it, and no, I don't agree with it. But when you delve deeper into your analysis, you note that of the 50% who said yes, I do agree with it, that 80% of those people were aged 24 or younger, right? So that in of itself tells you data that more current generations are more in favor of it versus older generations. Again, I'm just talking hypothetically here. And then you might find that all the older respondents said a particular thing. So what you can notice here is different patterns depending on the questions with different age ranges, okay? And that's really important for analysing change over time, okay? So that's an important question to have. Another one to have as well is gender. Now, it won't always be, you might not have gender as your cultural difference, but it's a good one to have as well, just as a point of reference to say that, again, similar to age, you might find that males or females agree or disagree on certain things, or you might find that non-binary to female agree on something, or non-binary to male disagree or agree on something. So you can, again, pick different trends in your data based on that information. So that's a really important one to have as well. The third one here is to have your cross-cultural comparison component as a question. So what that might look like, if your cross-cultural comparison is gender, you've sort of already done it here. But if it's not gender, let's say it's something like sexuality, and you're looking at how sexuality plays into a contemporary issue of some sort. You might ask, what sexuality do you identify as? And then list a bunch of sexualities there. Or if you're looking at it between two different or a few different religions, you might list what they are there. You might look at, let's say you want to examine the upper and middle class, or upper and lower class on something. So let's say we're looking at gender workplace quotas, and you want to examine which social classes agree or disagree with that. If you could again get trends here based off what those social classes are. Now, you may have to indicate what they are specifically you're looking at. If you're doing something like social class, you wouldn't just write upper, middle and lower. You would probably write upper and in brackets, do a bit of background research and find out in Australia what average household income is considered an upper class bracket versus a middle and lower class bracket. So you might have to look at that a bit as well. If you're wanting to compare certain ethnicities, so let's say if we were looking at the topic of Aboriginal exclusion in regards to jail, you might ask, do you identify as Aboriginal, yes or no? You might then have a follow-up question of what ethnicity do you identify as? Are you Caucasian? Are you Australian? What are you? And list what they are. And so again, similar to with age and gender, we can pull apart trends in data based off people's responses, based off what ethnicity they are. So that is an important question to have. The last one that you must have, again, is just a question, is there anything else you would like to add? Just in case people have something else that they want to add. The thing that you must make sure you do is that no question is required, because that's unethical research. People should be able to skip a question if they like. You should also always on each question add what's called other here. Don't type other, because what happens if you type other, people click other, right? Whereas if you press this button here that says add other, and it sort of comes up in grey with the 3 dots, what that looks like is this, where people can click that and then they have the option to write what it is that they want to write. Okay, so making sure you do that is appropriate as well. Ensuring you know the difference between multiple choice and checkboxes as well. So let's say, for example, with this question, you only want people to be able to pick one. You leave it as multiple choice, and it appears like so, where they can only pick one thing. If you want it to be a checkbox, that means they can pick more than one thing. So what that would look like is this, where you can tick, okay, multiple options. So making sure you're picking the right thing for the right question, depending on what it is you're after, is important to do as well. Typically, again, like we learnt in our previous questionnaire, you want to start off with these sort of lower-ended quantitative questions, and then you want to move more into qualitative questions. In terms of how many questions should I have, it's up to you. I would probably aim again for at least 10 so that you have some good data. The other thing as well is that you can always go back and do additional questionnaires. So nothing is stopping you from just doing one questionnaire. you might decide to do 2 or 3 different questionnaires. As you're writing, for example, you might go, oh, I didn't really get much data on this focus question that I want to analyse. My assessment task is still due in 2 weeks or a week and a half. I might create another questionnaire quickly that's a bit more targeted towards information that I need, and then you can use that. So feel free to create additional questionnaires. You don't just have to create the one. The other thing I want to point out is just around, I guess, formatting. Make sure you number your questions, question 1, 2, 3. Make sure you use like proper grammar, like don't just write all in lowercase. Don't ask your question in caps because it looks like you're yelling. Just a capital letter at the start and then continue and flow on again. So see, if I wrote, you know, what is your ethnicity here in caps, it's just a bit off-putting. So just write normally, and make sure you put a question mark on the end of them as they are questions. Okay, so little things like that, making sure that we're doing, making sure they're in the right order. So for example, I'm not going to have question 1, question 3, then question 2. Okay, so I'm going to make sure it looks good because this is going out to the public, right? So we want to make sure it looks good. And those little things might put someone off from answering it, like me. Okay, so make sure that those last things are in there. The other thing I want you to make sure is that if you go to the settings page in your questionnaire, you want to make sure that anyone can answer your question, and there's something that will automatically be toggled on, which I want you to switch off. So when you go to settings, under responses, click that down, you'll notice that this one's turned on. Okay, restrict to users in the Department of Education. We want to untick that, because if we tick that and you're sending this out to, say, your parents, etc., unless they have an @education email, they're not going to be able to do this quiz. So you need to untick that. Okay, and as soon as you've unticked it, it's saved and you can move on. Okay, but it's really important that you do that, and leave everything else unticked as well. Okay, if you want to go and change, you know, the format of it, you want to make it, you know, look pretty different, choose different image headers or font, whatever. If you do change the font, don't make it like something disgusting like Comic Sans or cursive like Lobster that might be hard to read for some people. I think just leaving it as a default is probably the best way to go, to be honest. But those little things make a difference. So that's how I want you to do your questionnaire. Obviously, the other thing is, if you're asking, you want to get a mix of quantitative and qualitative data. Okay, so let's say for argument's sake, I'm just doing the death penalty, and I ask a sort of standard question after this, something like, do you support in principle the idea of the death penalty for criminals who have committed a very serious crime, i.e. such as murder? Right, let's say that's my question, right? I'm going to add yes as an option, no as an option. Look, Google's kind of guessing. Don't have maybe, change it to somewhat. Okay, because that's where some people can go, oh, it depends on what it is. And then what you do, you wouldn't just leave it at that. You would write another question and you would say, please explain your reasoning for the above question. And what this does is that then gives you, you've got quantitative data. So you can say in your research, 80% of people in principle support the idea of the death penalty. When asked to explain their reasoning, people stated blah, blah, blah. So you've got qualitative data now to back up your quantitative data. The thing that you have to make sure is that you switch this to paragraph and not short answer. And I'll show you why. If it's short answer, let's say I'm writing this really good reason. See how it just keeps going along like this? I can't reread what I've written. It's really annoying. So if I go paragraph though, and see this, as I'm typing, I can see what I've written and it all stays there. Okay, so even if it is a short answer technically, always just hit paragraph. It makes things much easier. So they're the sorts of things I want you to look for when you create your questionnaire. Obviously, try aim for at least 10 questions. More is probably a bit better. If, again, you don't get the data you're after, you can always create another questionnaire, and you can do that as you write as well. Just be mindful of the time period and the turnaround period that you'll need. Okay? So that's questionnaire. Now, we're going to talk about interviews here, and we're going to be pretty brief because this is a great thing about an interview. You can be a little bit cheeky here, okay? You have already got a bunch of great questions here. Use them as your interview, okay? Use your questionnaire questions as your interview questions. And that's valid. That's perfectly normal. That's not like cheating. That's not doing the wrong thing. If anything, that's what we would call like working smarter, so to speak. I'm just going to shut this blind. That's a bit better. Don't have stripes on me now. So, can't even remember what I was saying. Oh, that's right. So interviews. So yeah, use your questionnaire questions as your interview questions. What will make it different though is that when you're interviewing someone, you can ask a follow-up question based on how they respond. And that's the power of the interview. You're gauging what they're saying and then asking follow-up questions, open-ended questions, closed-ended questions, and judging that tone. In a questionnaire, you don't necessarily get to do that. So say in a questionnaire, someone writes a really interesting answer and you want them to go into more detail on it. They don't, okay, because it's a questionnaire. Whereas in an interview, you have that opportunity to do that. So that's a really short version of an interview. You guys know that, again, an interview is a one-on-one conversation with people. It can be a formal interview or it can be an informal interview. You can do interviews over the phone. That's perfectly fine. You can do interviews via email. In person and face-to-face or over the phone is probably the best way because then you can ask those follow-up questions. But yeah, that's how I want you to do an interview, is using your questionnaire information. Work smarter, not harder, as they say. That's it for this one. Thanks very much.